Thanks for being here, everyone. So this is the fourth installment of the Building the State-of-the-Art Claude Code Agentic coding demos. So this space was originally conceived because we're all working separately on agentic coding and have different workflows, techniques, tools that we're utilizing. And it can be, working in isolation can be challenging. It's hard to know if we're using the best and brightest and latest and greatest tools, if we're using them in the most effective way. So we thought we should create a space to bring people together who are working at the leading edge with these agentic coding tools and just do some knowledge sharing. So tonight we're going to start with some terms and definitions and kind of all get on the same page here with Claude Code being the focus of tonight's session. And then after that, we'll do a couple of demos. And then finally, to round out the night, we can have some kind of conversations in smaller groups and talk about what's working and what's not. As a part of this group, we have a repository that we will submit a PR to at the end of this session with just an update of everything that we talked about. So you can always go back and sort of reference the techniques and demos that we have talked about in this session. So I'll hand it off to you, Everett, to say a little bit more and talk us through Claude Code.
Yeah, OK. So a few things. Fable came out today. For those of us that follow, OK, how many people don't know what Fable is? OK, this is important. So Fable is Anthropic's newest model. It's a Mythos-class model, which is the same size or capability that found 30-year-old security vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel, which prompted Anthropic to go on a kind of a large cybersecurity campaign to work with a bunch of open source projects to try to secure a bunch of software infrastructure. So you can just use that model right now, and it has a bunch of extra safety guardrails right now, but it's cracked AF. I'll just say that much. You should be token maxing on Fable as much as you can. One of the things that I always like to do with when a new model comes out is I look back at my passion projects and I'm like, can you see something here that I haven't seen before, past models haven't seen before? Are there any blind spots? Try to invert the problem or this or that. And I think that those are really great ideas. The whole point of this session is to try to elevate what are actual concrete things that worked. We're not going to have a ton of great examples on Fable today because it came out only so many hours ago. But what we can talk about is a little bit of orientation around what agentic coding is, what these models are really capable of, how we've got here, and then we'll dive into some actual demos on what's working. So building the state-of-the-art SF, what a better, there's no better place to share agentic techniques and try to exploit them and share them with each other than right here. And I think the diffusion of this knowledge is critically important to try to reduce the gradient that is constantly forming as people who pay attention and token max all the time learn more, and the folks who are just learning about it are kind of incrementally falling behind. So I get the anxiety. We're hoping to quell some of that. I'm going to go through a few slides here. This is our original slide deck that we made when we did building the state-of-the-art at first. And yeah, so it's an IRL event series. We've already talked about kind of origins. But the goal is that we're collaborating here as opposed to working alone with Claude. And this is really old now, which is crazy that it's old. But back in December, OK, so here's the full history of what Claude Code is. So Claude Code's this harness in an agentic terminal where you open a terminal on your computer, you type Claude, and this whole UI pops up. And you send a message, and that message gets sent to the model, and it can see your computer, can change files, you can write code, you can build an entire app. And it sparked this huge AI revolution. When it first came out, it wasn't that great. But now that Anthropic has been iterating models on it, performing reinforcement learning on it. It's gotten really good. It's kind of served as like the canonical example of what an agentic harness should be. And now there's several competitors that are arguably a lot better than Claude Code as of recently, probably within the last month. But back when we first made this, Claude Code was like the best, bar none. What's important is like the context of like the models here. So when GPT-5 it was like first came out, it was a big deal. Prior to that, all we had was like 3.7 Sonnet and 2.5 Pro. And these were like the first models where people who were coding all the time felt like they could actually like write code that worked. They couldn't debug, they couldn't build an entire application, but like they weren't just hallucinating everything all the time. GPT-5 was a huge improvement in capability, followed closely by Claude 4 Opus and Gemini 3 Pro, and they're all kind of in that same class of models that we don't care about anymore because everything else is so much better. And what's important to think about every time a new model comes out is that it's like an exponential increase in capability. It's not close. It's like a big capability improvement. So this was back in like March when we were talking about 4.6 Opus, and since then we've had 4.7 Opus in Sonnet and Claude 4.8, and now today Fable has come out, and that's effectively Claude 5. Claude 5 is probably over 10 trillion parameters or so, and it is running on these giant B300, GB300 racks inside data centers that are hauling a ton of electricity, and that's why it's so expensive to run. But a lot of our usage is subsidized. So when you use any of these models, you're getting like a lot for free, which is why we token max. More importantly, kind of mentioned this earlier, we're living through like this once, not just like once in a lifetime, but like once in a potentially human history thing, unless the whole world like had an apocalypse, they had AI, and now like the sun god. I don't know if you've seen that meme of the sun god cycle. We don't need to get into that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Yeah, look, here, AI is very, very powerful compared to what it was a year ago, even 6 months ago. A lot of this feels like magic. And I would argue that the gap between the people who effectively use these models and these harnesses versus the people who are very new to it is like an ocean of capability. And so it's quite meaningful to come here and try to be able to share how to exploit some of these techniques. And I think if you're only doing this alone, you just aren't going to find out like what other people are able to. And it's like upsetting because you like spend all this energy, all of this time, all this emotion into your projects, you put all this effort in, and sometimes the model just isn't good enough for that task, and then it gets better. Or sometimes the way in which you could go and solve that task changes and it's like your ability to solve it just from a different workflow or process. And so I think the literacy of using agentic coding tools is kind of another goal for this event series. OK, moving that over there. Yeah, so we're going to share what's working, what's not. I'm going to show you guys my marketing content engine a little bit later. We're recorded. If you don't want to get recorded, GTFO. Tonight's format. OK, so we're just going to like dive into like what Claude Code, this piece of software that runs on your computer, like what the heck is it? And like how is it actually structured to be able to do the things that it does? We've got this model, and then it's got like all these functions around it and make it do things. And like I'm going to go through what those are. OK, that's Claude Code. If you haven't seen that before, go install Claude Code. It'll change your life. There's Claude, the model from Anthropic. There's Claude Code, which is the terminal. There's Claude Code on the web, which is a different product. There's also Claude Cowork, the desktop app, which has code and chat capabilities. If you're just chatting with AI models, you're behind. If you're just using Cowork, you're behind. If you're using Claude Code, you're behind. There's like so many new tools that are coming out, and maybe it's like perfect for your workflow, but like for folks that are pushing like million-line PRs like confidently, you just need to like understand that like the state of the art has moved. There's the agent SDK, which like you can use to like script agents. There's plenty of other frameworks out there too. And then there's like the actual Anthropic API, which is like the bare bones thing where you can just like send a request to a model and it responds, right? And this is kind of like the ecosystem. That's what we're going to focus on today. It's the terminal. And that's like arguably truth. If you stick to Claude Code terminal and you don't learn anything else, you will generally stay up to date with the state of the art. And so it's a good bet. Codex is the same. I'm not bashing Codex. I think GPT 5.5 is an amazing model, and I use it all the time. I think it's probably better for coding than like even 4.7 or 4.8 is at times. It just depends on the domain. It reads your code base. It can look at all your files. It can open files and edit files. And by doing that, that's like almost everything you actually need to do on a computer, as it turns out. And it can look at your web pages. It can do your job for you if you set it up right, and then your job changes. OK, how many people don't have Claude Code installed on their computer? You got something else, though? Codex. Yeah, OK, yeah. All right. So nobody else raised their hand, just to let you know. So like that's, back when we first did this, I think we had almost half the people didn't have Claude Code set up. So the diffusion of the technology is taking place. I think we're all in agreement here. If you don't know how to do that, or if you're not constantly upgrading, do it. Yeah, so we don't really need to talk about scripting with the agent SDK. Almost all of us are interactive at the terminal. But there's kind of been an evolution since we made this presentation, which is there's apps like Willow where you can, like, you'll hit a button, it'll record, and then it'll paste the transcription really quickly, and it accelerates development really quickly. Like there's a lot of people who have moved away from typing altogether and are just using voice commands, and it's accelerating their work because, as it turns out, the cognitive load of typing and having to retain the language in your brain for that long is more taxing. You're consistently having to put more electrons through your neurons as opposed to just you say it and it's done. Okay, so there's some like cache eviction going on there. Okay, so we're just going to blow through this. But like, what is Claude Code, right? Really, at the end of the day? We're going to talk about the anatomy of the tool. Okay, so this is like the harness. So there's a lot of confusion before we got to like this harness step on what tools and agents were. Tools are the thing, like effectively just a piece of code that the model can run, can choose to run. It has input arguments and it outputs something that the model can see. That's what a tool is. It can literally be any piece of code. Commands are these like helpers in your like interactive UI, where if you press /, it's like a shortcut. You type it out and it does this skill or this thing. Hooks are these things that get fired at certain points when Claude Code is executing. So a pre-tool hook would be like, oh, I'm about to go and run this dangerous command. Let me stop that by adding a new hook. Or let's say that I am done with my workflow, and now that I've done a git commit, I always git push, something like that. The CLAUDE.md is kind of what everybody thinks about as like your repo's local either system prompt or something. I would not put very much information in your CLAUDE.md. I would keep it under 100 lines if possible, and I would use it as an index of links leading to other places, not like a bunch of prose or regular text. And the reason for that is this gets loaded every single time, and context that lives in your skills or in your markdown files goes stale very quickly. And so you don't want to steer your model wrong. You want something that's durable in your CLAUDE.md. OK, skills. I'm going to bash skills for a hot sec. I'll explain what they are. So it's a markdown file, but it's got some effectively like this piece of structured text at the top that you call front matter. And that makes it so that you can organize and do things with that front matter. Skills are suggested. They're suggestive. So like a model can choose to use it or not. If you tell a model to use a skill, it'll use it. But if you have a workflow that uses a skill, chances are it's not always using that skill all the time. It's not a deterministic thing like a hook is. So there's a big difference between writing an LLM workflow where you've got mostly code and then one LLM step in the middle versus what maybe using an agent harness with skills is using. And if you go and look at the traces, it's frustrating.
Question.
Oh.
I also find that Claude.md is suggestive as well.
Yes, absolutely. I would argue this is a paradigm I adopt personally because I am fluent in software and I can write software and I knew how to write software before AI. But I use AI to write software. I don't just use AI to go and do work. If I have a piece of work that I want done, I am constantly incrementally implementing that with more and more code and trying to reduce the amount of AI that's in it. Because any piece of LLM that's in there is just like, you're introducing more chaos and non-determinism into your loop. And I think skills fall into that bucket. One thing I will mention that's a little scary for a lot of folks who use a lot of skills and are like running through their markdown files and changing them all the time. There's a lot of people who have used a system prompt and use a ton of different skills or have installed them. There's vulnerabilities, yes, but what actually is probably worse is all of these models have been trained to be good with no skills. So there's chances are that as you're using new models, your old skills are corrupting your workflow. So generally, trying to stay up to date with the state of the art is hard. Keep your skills light. Use code instead. And the great thing is you don't need to be a software programmer to write code anymore. OK, MCP is bad. Some people like it. I don't like it. It has a bunch of overhead for JSON. I know it's come a long way. I know that it's gotten a lot better. Nobody uses MCP anymore unless you're like an enterprise who is being asked by somebody who doesn't know to use MCP. Everybody is just using a CLI and the API directly on all of these external services.
I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, where MCP is very useful if you want to hook something up to something, and then you could the way the model executes and interacts with it doesn't matter, right? You could do code mode, and you could still have the same capabilities, but you have that nice hookup surface.
I would acknowledge that I think that there's a high skill cap to doing MCP well. And I think there's a lot of people who don't do MCP well. And if you don't know how to go and use MCP, or if you're not willing to go and invest in that skill cap, then there's just going to be there's a big learning curve for that. MCP does make it easy to hook things up, but servers go stale. And so they might turn off. Whereas maybe plugins are kind of a different ecosystem as well, which is probably my next thing. Oh, no. OK. We can talk about plugins. So plugins are these things that are they're basically repositories of skills, or they're this thing that you can just hook on, and it's supposed to be easier than MCP. What we learned when we first did this, talked about agent patterns, is Claude Code can use subagents. It can delegate work to itself or to another model, a lower model. And it's as easy as just saying, go use an agent team. Go use a subagent. And so if you want that determinism in your workflow, then maybe you spin up a subagent yourself. But it's as easy as just saying, use a subagent. Parallelize your work. OK, so the .claude folder is probably, if you're genuinely literate in Claude Code, this is the thing that you care about the most. This is where all of your configuration lives. This is where all of your skills live. Maybe you've got a plugin defined in here. But basically, there's this folder with a dot in front of it, so it's hidden, which isn't super helpful. But if you do Command-Shift-Dot, it'll reveal all the folders with a dot in front of it, and you'll be able to see inside of it everything that's in there. So basically what that looks like is it has settings for your Claude Code in that repo, and that means that you can scope your settings to a particular repo. Okay, so I know this is a lot of information. I'll try to move quickly. This is straight from the docs. I didn't make this. And so if you have questions about it, go look at the docs. Yeah, so tonight's goal is we're gonna actually demo a few techniques or like workflows that work well. I'll demo one, and then we have another guest demo. And if you have a demo that you want to share, please let us know. We probably have time for 3 demos. And we're just looking for like a repeatable name method for accomplishing a specific objective in Claude Code. Exploiting it means you should be able to use it every time, and it works, and it's like helpful. And that's like the reinforcement learning version of exploit, not the bad go and exploit someone. OK, we're going to move on. So that was before I see much else. Question? Yeah.
Yeah. With Claude Code, are most people running that on the desktop or in the web browser?
I think it's a huge mix. I think it's a big mix. I think some folks are using a lot of like cloud sandboxes for their work. Some people are using it locally a lot and are still managing a bunch of terminal tabs. There's a bunch of other tools like Conductor, where you can have like a bunch of work trees open at the same time, and maybe they're using that. There's also the desktop app. I think it's a mix.
What do you think is easiest to get started?
Probably the Claude Code desktop app. Yeah. You stick with that, you'll stay near the state of the art until you outgrow it, and I think that's a good place to start. Any other questions on like hooks or on the anatomy, or we just want to jump right into like cool things? Yeah. Yeah. OK. So do I have anything else? That's a repo, by the way. OK. So imagine you've got Claude. You just sat down and you're running it, and it needs to go and run a few tool calls. OK. One of those tool calls might be, I want to go and use this skill. OK. A hook is this software term of like, I want a specific part of the life cycle of Claude using a tool. I want something to trigger every time. And you might, inside of that hook, which is a piece of code, have a condition to like go and check things. But the whole point is like, there's all of these different hooks that will fire at different points in your session. Whereas like a skill is like a tool, right? It's this piece of markdown that tells Claude how to do something. You might implement a skill in a hook, or a tool in a hook, and then the hook is like a hook is an advanced concept. Usually, I don't know very many people that are actually using hooks.
Here's a tangible example of a hook. So I have a hook that says, Claude, if you're ever about to send an email, don't do it. And instead, consult with Lee and ask if that actually should be sent. So it prevents any email from being sent. So the system has this trigger, then this hook fires, and it says, oh, I was about to do this thing. I'm instead not going to do it because I have this special instruction that's encoded in the hook, and consult Lee instead.
So the hook is more like the blend, and then the skill is like the point.
Exactly, yes.
Is that some sort of a mutation policy intervention that you're talking about, like in the Claude code? Like you have the hooks, it's already there, but then there's some sort of instructions being passed by the workflow or something like that you're not supposed to, or it's internal instruction?
It's It's internal instruction. So yeah, it's I'm not sure actually where this lives within my system. I'll have to check.
It's in your .claude folder.
Right, but like where, like how it would get triggered, like.
Basically, Claude Code in whatever directory it's running in will always create one of those .claude folders and uses the configuration in there to run. And so if you have a hook there and it's registered on your Claude Code instance, it will trigger every time. And it runs in the background.
So just looking for that event.
Yeah.
Event is fired.
Yeah, so pre-tool, got hit, or post-tool got hit, and then I want to do this thing. Yeah.
Is there anything right up there in the Claude Code that we can actually read about this? In the docs?
But it's in the docs.
Yeah.
You can go look
just
at the docs.
look at hooks.
Would you like?
Thank you so much for the walkthrough. I had a question, especially around the skills that you mentioned, where B2B using certain skills, but Claude has already worked at a lot higher models, and if some of the skills that we've been using maybe aren't paid. How do we test that out and make that assessment if we would have to verify the existing skills that we have?
Evals, which is the hardest part of building an agentic system. Basically, you have to know what you want ahead of time, and you have to test for it all the time. And it's taking a software development concept and applying it to large language model outputs. So if you have a particular workflow that's really important, and you need to know whether or not that particular workflow is going to continue working on the new model, then you need to have an eval for that. And an eval is just a behavior-driven test. Yeah, generally.
Can you expand a little more about the behavior-driven test?
Yeah, so there's a couple concepts in software development originally. Like test-driven development is popular, and people like to go and write all their tests first before they go and write the actual code that does the thing. So then that you encode the invariants or all the tests that you need to pass if it's going to work. Behavior-driven development is another iteration of that, where you're focused on how the system works. There's other things like mutation testing, crap graders, and other things that can take a look at code. And these are all software development concepts. But basically, evals are very hard. And the whole point is that LLMs are difficult to wrangle. And so generally, it's kind of a long learning thing to get into. Yeah, that's like a whole series of talks.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll do that someday.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have another question?
Oh.
Would you recommend using Claude Code desktop or person?
Do you code a lot? I would just use Claude Code. Yeah. I don't know very many people that are there's a lot of software developers who just aren't writing code with their hands anymore also and are ditching their IDEs. So, yeah.
I have a question. So you were talking about, sounds like we're moving to more deterministic workflows in general. You're saying skills are out. We're not going to rely on models to call them when it makes sense. How do you think about kind of swapping out old skills or auditing old systems that you've developed?
Yeah. So maybe this is a good point, actually, for me to dive into my demo, because I think this is, I'll have to answer that pretty directly. So I do marketing for a company called Eventual, and we steward an open source project called Daft. Daft is a distributed data engine. It works very similar to Polars or Pandas. It's a data frame engine. But we're really good at working with video, running models, and anything that a lot of these multimodal AI capabilities are focused on, particularly for physical AI and robotics. So a lot of my marketing work is about publishing blog posts or socials. And so I have a content engine that helps support my work. And I'm going to kind of go into the architecture without having to dive into all the details of everything I'm posting, hopefully.
Do we have any marketers in the room? All right.
Who else likes to generate AI slop though?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So then you guys should listen. Who all has like looked at AI slop and is like, how do they make that? Yeah. Because there's a bunch of people who are maybe like aggregators on socials, and they're like posting one-piece edits all day long, and they're just ranking up millions of views. And like, I love those guys, but at the same time, that's a bot. And so I can show you a little bit what that looks like behind the hood. This system that I've made is pretty organic. I'm going to dive into Cursor here. Conductor is great because I can just move into Cursor with a single command. I love Conductor. Conductor was our second edition. This is how I got into it, actually. OK. So your question was, if skills are becoming like obsolete or aren't as durable, and I'm consistently trying to move towards determinism, how do you go about doing that? So Claude Fable 5 is here. So basically, I already enumerated this before, but I use AI to write software. And the better software I write, the better my system is. And software scales with the complexity of my work. And so inherently, if my work is complex, then my software will be complex. And I have discovered over time how to implement that complexity or reduce that complexity with my code. This is probably like V4 of this marketing engine. Basically, I have, oh, that's the wrong one. I want this one? Yeah. OK. So that was a different project. We'll talk about that in a minute. OK. So I've got some code here with a bunch of files and folders. I've got some content with a bunch of campaigns. OK. So this fundamentally, the campaign in a content engine dictates kind of everything. It's how you organize what you're showing. It's what channels you're looking to post to. Maybe it's Twitter. Maybe it's the blog. Maybe it's Instagram, right? The way in which I author and edit and review and publish, we'll talk about later. But the atomic unit of a content engine is the campaign. That's just my wording for it. You might have a different word. Basically, for instance, I wanted to do a campaign on a particular feature in Daft called daft.file. And I made a bunch of blog posts about it. And so I have all those blog posts in Markdown listed here. This is just the bare bones of it. Now, this is like the artifact of what my system creates. The thing that actually goes and builds this is actually in the code in addition to Claude Code. So we can just start Claude right here. And hopefully I'm on, oh, this is too big. Fable, heck yeah.
Yay.
OK. How does this marketing engine work? Oh, I have no internet.
So Everett, if you were at home right now, would you be speaking to Claude rather than typing?
I would. I should show that. OK, so we're connected to the internet, maybe, in a moment. Oh, no, my phone died.
Here, got one.
Yeah. So I can go through the rest of it while we get my phone plugged in. So we got a campaign. We got all this piece of content. A piece of content in my system has a few sections to it. It's got front matter, just like a skill. Okay. It's got a title. It's got which campaign it belongs to. It's got some sources that I'm referencing that I want Claude to look at when it goes and authors something, right? So, for instance, for my releases campaign, there's specific pull requests and a specific tag on GitHub that it can just go look at to like say, hey, I want to go write about this. Okay. for daf.file, I had a particular feature I wanted to focus on, so I have a bunch of docs that I wanted to reference. And I've got the channels listed here, maybe the profile that I want, because I have a bunch of profiles as well. So there's a bunch of like dimensions of complexity here on like who's posting on what channels with what piece of content. How does that piece of content get published so that if there's a link in a social post back to it, it's all taken care of. We've got like a status here, when it was created and published, and then who the author was. OK, so the way I've chosen to implement this is the section after the front matter is just like what goes in the blog. But I call this the canonical content section. So if you do a bunch of research for releases, or you do a bunch of stuff, you would just put it in here. And let's say you're only doing socials. Maybe your social copy would come down here. So for on X, I've got these pieces of copy that will go on my Twitter post. And thank you. So try to get internet here in a moment. This structure is just like the end artifact that my system creates. Like I've got one for X, I got one for LinkedIn, and then I've got these like kind of rules for how I include a link or how I include an image in there. And like there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. If you just have a way of doing it, you can commit to that, and you can use code to do that. Don't allow. So how does this actually work? How do I get from an idea to an actual piece of content that gets published? Maybe we can do that. So with the fact that I have all of this set up, I can just say, hey, bro, once I get internet. OK. Hey, bro, can we post another daf.file blog post with, let's just do some socials. Daf.file social post as a demo for BSOTA. And so this Mythos-class model is going to go write me some AI slop. It's probably not going to be very good. I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing. But at least I burned some tokens doing it.
I have a question about that. So for these non-deterministic like tasks like writing copy, how do you go about improving the quality of this post?
Yeah, so there's increasingly at my work, and I think this is a larger trend, the AI slop is like getting to us. And like there's been a kind of a big return to like actually just human written stuff. So like my work, a lot of people are just writing things themselves. But my releases campaign is end-to-end automated. When an engineer at my company cuts a release of our software and it goes live on GitHub, a cron job looks at that page for a new release, and it kicks off the authoring workflow. And I might not find BSOTA, but that's OK. So each of these, especially this last one, was effectively created end-to-end automated. I didn't do anything. It opened a PR, and then once I reviewed it, I merged it into the blog, and the socials were ready. Okay, so I do that because I was able to do that because the template for this is almost fully deterministic, and a lot of the copy that's in here is technical. It's not opinion. It's not stylistic. And so if I were to have like a particular workflow working on social copy, I would spend a lot of time on the prompt. I would spend a lot of time getting the precise language of the register and what terms you use and what terms you don't use. And I would probably spend a lot more time doing that as opposed to like just volume.
So let's say that Claude ends up writing something that you determine to not be in your brand's voice, for example. Are you then giving that feedback and updating the prompt and the do not use this word list, for example?
Yes, for sure. And that's important. What's important here is that you have a spot where like you're tuning that. if you're just like yeeting social posts with like some random skill, then like chances are you're not really tuning a system. You're just tuning like that one session, right? So let me dive into the guts here on like how a piece actually gets authored in the releases workflow. So, hey, in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to just say, how do releases work end to end? And while that kicks off, I'll actually show you. This content engine is built with a few layers. So strategically, my company has OKRs, or company objectives, and we have specific goals with metrics that we track. I'm not going to show what those are, but basically, we're logging these in analytics. We're looking at our social impressions. We're looking at how many reactions we get. We're looking at what the hits are on our blogs. And if we reach a certain number, then we hit our marker. That's strategy goes in here, and all of this is human written. I think that's really, really important, is that everything here is human written. Then we have operations, which is like me. I'm the operator. And so these are all just markdown files in these folders. And then the code lives here in source. And then after operations, which is like, let's say, so I've got these 2 meetings in the week. On Monday, I have to tell everybody what the content plan is. And on Thursday, I have to do a retro and say, like, how did everything do? So that's what these are. So operations works at like a weekly level. Strategy is operating at like a quarterly level. And the engine is operating at a daily level, if not smaller. It's actually performing the authoring. It's doing the editing. It's accumulating code snippets. This is where all of like the hard work goes into. So basically, we've got these things called campaign cards. And this is like the source of truth for everything that you write on any given campaign. And I just want to hedge that like this is a way to do it. This is a way to organize a content engine as a code base. You might have different ways of doing this that could be good. This is just one way.
Sorry, just a question. This whole system exists to solve a problem, and so can you just tell me a little bit more about what that is? Because I'm finding it's a little bit abstract.
Yeah.
So, like, what is the hard part of not being a marketer? What's the hard part of actually running a bunch of campaigns? Like, is it a velocity thing? Is it what's the hard part that you're actually trying to solve? That'll help me have a better sense of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm a one-person marketing army. There's only 2 other people that do marketing or developer relations at my company, and neither of those 2 folks are focused on content.
Okay, so the specific challenges that you have are both, it's like a volume question of getting a message out, or you have a new feature launched and you have to communicate that to the world.
Yep.
And then relative to some products, they're like your audience is technical, so the claims that you're making in your posts need to actually match one-to-one to what you actually released and not be false.
Yeah.
So there's like a falsifiable element to what you're doing, and then it sounds like there's probably just a lot of production work that you don't want to have to do.
Yeah. So a majority of this is production and organization.
Okay.
And that's just like cognitive load. That's not on me anymore. The other goal is that somebody else, if I'm out sick, should be able to come in and just ask Claude to create a new piece of content, and it just works as well. So hopefully I'm building this thing to be agnostic to me. I'm sure it's not. But the whole goal is that I'm scaling myself. I'm scaling the number of campaigns I can support at one time. And I just have a single source of truth. I don't know very many people that are doing marketing as software, like directly. And to me, I'm trying to like have an AI native realization of, can I ship content on these campaigns regularly? And that would just prove to be really, really hard when I was owning everything manually. Yeah. So I'm shipping more content than I could if I didn't have this system. And that means I'm able to honor the obligations that the open source project has to communicate with the wider audience, on top of, give us, get larger attention about our products and services and stuff. So generally, there's like entire teams that might manage content, like your whole PR team, and I'm doing it all on my own. So this is a coordination problem, I would say, as much as it is a production problem. And then, like a lot of other projects, review is one of the biggest bottlenecks. Yeah.
Hey, I know you mentioned about your background being in software engineering. Curious about how did you get into marketing, and like especially with this transition that you had.
I will get into that later. Yes, happy to get into that later. We can chat more about that later. Another question.
Yeah, just as you basically have these campaigns that you run, you mentioned that the ones that you're doing right now are more like feature releases and they're kind of in a templatized format. So it's the value add here, like you guys were saying, is more in the orchestration and kind of the production work that's kind of being downsized. How does that relate more to like performance campaigns that are going to have an ROI that they expect, and they're going to have there's going to be a lot of data on the front end that you're using to like build the campaign based on whatever you did previously, and there's going to be a lot of data on the back end that you're going to have to like wrangle and do something with.
Yeah, so I can't necessarily show you my dashboard, but so basically in Q2, our company was focused on just like getting the word out and telling people about Daft. Daft's cool, you should use it, try it out if your use case supports it. We're more focused on a commercial product now that centers around like robotics and physical AI, and includes products outside of Daft. And so our OKRs have shifted from being focused on impressions to like, can we get robotics researchers to adopt this product specifically? And we want a certain number of those. That's like, did they react to our post directly? It's not how many, it doesn't matter how many impressions or how many pieces of content out there. Maybe it's going to a bunch of different events and it's like a whole different thing than content. You need to have kind of the end-to-end connection here. What I'm not necessarily showing you is the like analytics side. So I have an entire like lakehouse. It's because I'm a data engineer, which is it's a database that lives on object storage. For folks that aren't technical, it's a bunch of data with a bunch of tables, and it holds all of our analytics data. And I'm able to query that directly from this repository to go and see what performance on a given post looks like. That took a long time just to set up, and that's just like engineering work.
Yeah.
That helps me complete the feedback loop on like what worked and what didn't. But here's my caveat. Every time I've went and looked at performance metrics and asked Claude to go vibe code like the feedback or like the close the loop and improve my marketing copy and things like that, it has not worked. And that's because I'm dealing with like real content that's going out to real people. I think there's a lot of fuzziness there. I think if this was like a closed system, it'd be a little bit different. But I'm basically like, if my goal was just to like maximize impressions and I left it to Claude, there would just be like violence and like, or like in politics all over our company website, right? So yes, I have not found a solution for like fully closing that gap.
How much did you pay for a solution that worked?
How much would I pay?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So that deterministically improved. Let's talk about the goal for a second, okay? So we build these AI systems to help improve like a particular workflow. Like we have all this content we want to communicate, and we want our Daft to be more popular. We want people to adopt it. We think it's great. We want the right people to adopt it. So let's say that we have a target number of 300% increase in stars from the last quarter that are being attributed to our thing. And the system like automates, just runs that in reinforcement learning loop, right? It reaches out to a bunch of, it has like the perfect content on X to bring folks in to the repository. because that's like at the end of the day, that's what my goal would be. Is like I want people to know about Daft and bring them in.
I can't guarantee the stars, but I can do the content.
But can you give me the content in my voice?
In your voice.
In my voice, with. Yeah, we should talk. Probably at least. So does it include publishing?
What do you mean by publishing?
Just posting it to socials with auto engagements?
Oh. Okay, we need to talk after.
Yeah, we need to talk about this. I would pay at least several $100s a month. Let's say that the seats are close.
It's
really.
not 100% automated. You still have to seed it with the ideas of what you want
Sure.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is also hard.
But because it has to be your ideas. It doesn't come
Yeah,
with
of course. Which is what the
Yeah.
campaigns and stuff.
Another
for.
question.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, doesn't this kind of all comes back to the whole like harness itself and like the context,
Yes.
like, management that you're doing, the governance on the back end, that is almost going to be custom to you and your project inherently. That you have to either build or like you can either outsource the customization, but you can't really ever buy that because it's so custom to you that you have to use it until it's there. And
Totally.
we need a like systems mindset to like be building those things as you go. Otherwise, none of it, like I bet your system wouldn't work in his hands and his system wouldn't work. Like it would take a huge, not huge, but there'd be like a shift to happen. Kind of like you're saying, where like it's not necessarily as repeatable yet.
I mean, if you look at what piece of code actually does content generation,
That's not going to be AI.
this is one folder nested inside of my piece of code that isn't the whole thing. Like the rest of the markdown stuff is my context that I need. And I've organized it in a way that's like that matches the complexity or the actual work, which I think is the hard part.
But if you're asking the question, like, is Claude going to be supported to do the engineering work to close the loop for Everett's specific use case? It feels like maybe more so than some random person walking off the street.
Yeah.
But still, if it's an unattributable event, like we're not going to be able to get any closer by using these tools.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Is there something you can do to make your writing your style of writing? So you read like 20 of your previous code base, like to make it like more similar to you, or like pull out salient points of you research like 10 different sources and these are the things that you normally
I would say not
Can you
naive.
repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is like, can Claude write in your style? Is there a way for you to come up with like a way for Claude write in your style? And the suggestion or the example is like, can you look at all of your previous writing and come up with a style from that? I've tried it. Naively, no.
I've gotten pretty close here, honestly. I've like really been diligent about telling Claude when it's not hitting the mark, and I've found that consistently showing it or taking a draft that it has written for me, editing it, and then returning to it and say, hey, add to my heuristic set. You know, things that what did I cut? What did I include? It's starting to get a lot better, but it's taken a lot of diligence and work.
I actually was trying this yesterday. I hadn't, like when AI was new, I wanted to just dictate and then have it write like me. Like that's the dream, right? But I was researching like the latest archive papers. I was like, what's the state of the art on AI detection? There's like all these skills to humanize it and all this stuff. And I created this whole like judging, the skill to like do all these judging and pairwise comparisons and like using way too many tokens to try to do this. But I like put a lot of time into it. And then at the end, I like went back to actually like writing something else, just actually going through the writing process. And I think the challenge is even if you dictate something, like you get all of your ideas out there, the way that AI is able to, like, there's something about the structure, like when you write yourself, it's imperfect the way that you structure it. And AI seems to just be like too good at structuring it in the same way. And it's just hard to make it like this randomness of being human. So I think it's why it's so easy to detect. It's like when it flows too well, it's like, oh, AI.
If it's too
I don't think
structured.
it's impossible forever, but it's really hard.
I think if you have like a particular social copy that's like a formula, like you are an influencer, you're popular for this one thing, I think that that's totally like doable, right? One-piece edits are a great example of that, right? And the releases thing is another really great example. Like, I just don't really care because I'm just explaining this piece of code. It doesn't have to be my voice, but yeah.
I have found that channel-specific communications are easier to do than just at large, what's my voice? So what I've done is like email specifically, like analyze all of my past emails. What are my sentence structures like? What's my tone like? Am I concise? Am I warm? So I have this file as just heuristics of like Lee's email writing style, and that's been a lot more effective. Same with text messages. I will text a friend very different voice than I'll write an email to a client. And I found like just taking it out at the channel level is very, very helpful for getting a more accurate voice.
So there's, in content, there's several stages, right? There's like, we've got this campaign, and I've tried to define everything about this campaign that this engine needs to know to work. And that's kind of all you need to know about it. That content card kind of helps formalize what the workflow is for that particular campaign. And it's unique almost every time. There are some things that are reproducible that I've turned into code. For instance, the engine, content gen, transcribe, diarize. Okay, so I really like this because I can go and run a transcription with voice activity detection, which means like silence detection, with diarization, which means splitting up who's speaking when, and run it on a local model in the cloud. And it just runs on the same model every time, and it just works. And then it spits out this HTML report of who was talking when, and I got these AI meeting notes from my videos, from my talks, from all of my meetings throughout the day, which is helpful when I've got this video and I want to make content out of it, or I want to make clips. That's an example of being able to like add content, but it could also just be as simple as like generating a code snippet. It could be as simple as creating cover art using an SVG. It could be as simple as the template inside my releases campaign is the same thing every time, and I just have like this piece of code that takes the release number and puts it in a piece of text. So anything that I can turn into code, I try to, is the point here. And I have some experimental stuff that I try to do along the side. Yes?
On that topic of trying to like minimize the AI component of a process and maximize the code component, as someone who's like not like semi-technical, I would say, what's the best way to like verify which pieces of your process are requiring AI and which ones aren't? So I feel like that can be a little bit fuzzy sometimes.
I think it is fuzzy. I think it's hard to know as you're learning your system. And if you don't understand how your system works, you're kind of always going to be stuck. Yeah. And I think that there's always this point of a new model comes out and you want to token max, you want to see what you can do with it. And then eventually you clean it up and you're like tearing it all down and you're distilling it back into the thing that you understand. And I think those are great points to be able to decouple and say, okay, I'm at V4, V5, V6, and I'm just like not afraid to iterate on the thing because it's so cheap to create new things. It makes it so easily corruptible, but also like it's okay to step back and like clean up. So like my answer is that to me is like human discovery, learning of I didn't understand the full process before. So it's I have to know it.
Two quick questions. One, do you have a front end for this, or do you just kind of run it in Claude Code? And secondly, related to that question, what are the common things you see other people doing where they're using AI when they really should be using AI to make software to do the thing? Like, what are those common?
I use AI to do things that software should probably be doing all the time. It's just that's a lot of it's like not my job. You know, if I ask Fable to open a pull request, that's crazy. That's like using the most expensive model who can like do whatever it wants to do the smallest tiny thing. I think at the end of the day, like.
But in terms of like people's jobs or people processes,
yeah.
Is there stuff that makes you like bang your head against the wall, being like, this is like a done
I try not to judge, honestly, because like I've been there. I think that there's a lot of like software decoupling concepts that, unless you've written code, isn't intuitive. I think there's a lot of folks who've spent a lot of time using Claude to just manage everything, and I think that scales to a certain extent for like a long time. And so then like the reason to like actually go down and organize everything yourself kind of has sometimes diminishing returns. I do think you have to do it eventually. And people who have written entire code bases or libraries, who understand what an interface is and what role that plays when you have concrete versus abstract like implementations, that's not something that everybody has experience with. But that skill comes in handy when I have to say, like, what are the separations of concerns of this system? And how do I organize my folders? And to me, I think just keep iterating. You don't have to be a software developer to do that. Whatever ends up like sticking long term and feels durable, hopefully that's the thing that works.
I wanted to reflect on that a little bit, and please correct me where this is different than your understanding. But I think it's very good to start from like, what is the choke point between me and my goal? And is that like upstream of all of the AI stuff, what am I trying to do here, and what is critical path to getting there? And if that's something that you are doing that is involving AI feels unstable, then that will kind of naturally bubble to the top. But I just find myself asking the question a lot, and I'm turning a lot of things into conversation. So there's some skills that apparently are on the way out, but essentially just like asking Claude to quiz me on what I believe, and then summarizing that and feeding it back to it. So it's like, what are these parts of the system that actually matter right now? What's actually holding me back? And then maybe asking the question back to Claude, like, okay, when should I actually think about making this a little more deterministic, if at all? And then a lot of my like high-level root Claude.md stuff on my computer is actually like, I tell Claude about my own personal failures, and I'm just like, hey, the most likely thing I am to do is overbuild because I fucking love building. Here's when to recognize that I'm doing this, and there's actually a whole file around that, because that's how I fail.
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you're doing something one-off and it's fast, I think generally in today's day and age, I think the intuition to not go and implement code right away is a good one. Unless you are consistently repeating something and you're consistently seeing failures, that's when I think you need to go into like break things down. I think that there's probably a lot of workflows that don't require code. But I do think that you open yourself up to inconsistent results when that happens. And so then it's about like, okay, what do you actually need the LLM for here? Is there, and maybe you don't know what code can be, what code can do and what it can't do. So ask, I would say, how can we make this more deterministic? Because I keep encountering these pains. This is the problem we are solving.
As you're kind of getting more developed and more like the system itself is kind of maturing, do you find that you're using like agents or named agents to like scope down the specific part of the process that does require the LLM? So it's like, hey, here's all this codified, non-smart work that's happening, and then here we have Joe Schmo agent come in, and like that's kind of more like it's more of an organizational thing than like an actual capability thing. Is that something that you find running that you're bumping up against as you have more robust, live tools?
I don't know if I'll be able to answer that. I might have to ask you to repeat that, but I think the way I'm interpreting that is like, when am I running into the moment where I'm like, oh, I need to go implement this with code? Or are you saying?
So like, as you kind of describe this system, it's like there's this loop that happens that kind of gets kicked off. There's all this information gathering, then there's some production work that happens, and then there's this publishing process.
Yeah.
As it goes through all of that, I'm assuming that there's kind of different points at which the LLM has to do the work and other points that it's just straight code. And at those different LLM points, do you use like an agent orchestration of some kind? Not necessarily because it's like doing work on your behalf, but it's like that's the point at which the Joe agent is being called to do the prep work, and then so then the LM itself is not just this whole model coming in to do the work. It's a scoped down agent that comes in to do the work.
I do not create specialized agents.
You don't. Okay.
I do have.
I think there's like, so you have a thing that you want to do, and you see like what the best way to do that is, and like you see where it fucks up.
Yeah.
Right. And where it fucks up, and where it's like it feels like the model is the most shaky, then you split that bit off into like a different agent. It could be a forked agent, it could be like whatever.
Yeah.
But like it's better to do like look at where the model like messes up and like watch it and do it incrementally, and then split off those like segregated little bits of context.
So I guess that's what I'm talking about. Like when the split up happens, I totally agree with that.
Like where do you see the model mess up, basically? Like you work with the model to do the task.
Yeah.
And like you watch it make the same mistake twice in a certain area. That's when you would consider either splitting it off or creating a skill or like.
Well, it's not necessarily a mistake. It's like there's three parts to your process. I don't necessarily need to go down the rabbit hole here.
No. Yeah.
But it's like you want the LM to act as a prep person. Like the role that they're taking on is different based on the different points of the process. So you don't want to just call a blanket Fable level model.
Sure.
Like you're saying.
Yeah. So we've got a production agent.
Yeah.
And a publishing agent and an authoring agent. Really, just the authoring agent is the only thing that actually matters. That needs to be an LLM because it's like we have this blog post or piece of content that we want to post.
Yeah.
Almost everything else can just get like once something is done, you can just kick this thing off, and then it publishes, right? I think that that's a prompt, in my opinion, not necessarily an agent identity, and I think there's like not a ton of difference between building a specialized agent and a skill.
I agree. Yeah.
So to me, skill libraries feel a little bit more like scalable than like entire agent identities, because I think the mental model is off. Like you're trying to do a task usually. If you have like a character, that might be different, right? And maybe that's like a better way to do like authoring is like I make an Everett character and it like knows everything about me and like, and then it can write like me, right? I don't do that, but like I don't often see cases where specialized agents with their own identities pays off.
Sure. Okay.
An LLM workflow is to say like, okay, I want to prompt Claude at this point in time. I've got all these things, it's all prepped, do this one thing. And then you've accomplished your step, I move on. That could be an agent, could just be a skill.
The word agent itself is kind of loose. I mean,
yeah.
Decided where that's landed, so I don't necessarily care about that word.
Yeah.
It's more like where the LLM is being interjected and what boundaries it has when it does its work. It's more where I'm still struggling to get it managed properly.
I think it's fuzzy. I think it's almost always domain specific.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think there's, when in doubt, domain specific it out. Like, yeah. I think it's really easy to get into frameworks and stuff. I'm not going to try to spend too much time because I think we've talked about this for a long time. I just want to quickly show folks, like I asked Claude earlier to make a PR or to create a piece of content. We can look at this content really quick. I got this front matter up here. Most of document pipeline is glue. Before any model sees a page, someone writes the whole download loop. And this em dash, it looks like Claude,
I have a question. So talk to me about the review process for this. How are you assessing quality of the content?
Vibes, so much vibes. Like there's definitely technical accuracy. So, here's the PR that opened for this piece of content, right? And I can go and look at the actual piece of content. Oh, and it made a cover page for me because it already has that tool, and in the releases campaign card, it points to that tool. And so then this is what gets posted along with the social copy. This is actually wrong. So that's one part of the review process. If I can see something that's wrong, then I'll just like, bruh, you screwed up. So like, review is like I will go and look at the file. I'll like go through word by word, and if I think it like vibes are good, then fine. The way that my publishing workflow works is if a PR gets opened, I have a secondary script that'll open a PR in the blog repo, because my blog doesn't live in my content engine. It'll also create the social post for me. So if I go to Ordinal, which is just the service that we use, then there is this, oh boy, I will have to find it. Oh, here it is. Then there is this then there's this social post that all I have to do is like post it, or I can like tag a reviewer on it, right? And then this one has the image attached. And all I did was open the PR. And that's all code. The LLM didn't do that. What the LLM can do, though, because it has all the tools to do it, is correct the crap. Which I think at the end of the day, it's like the escape lever is like you just had Claude do everything anyways, even when you have automation, which I think is like important to acknowledge, right? Like you shouldn't feel bad that you need to run code and it didn't work. Just continue to iterate on your system. Reviewing is reviewing. I don't have like I do have checklists actually. I guess maybe that's like a good thing to look at is I have a large number of evals for releases because it's such a deterministic workflow. And then Claude will, so I have Claude review the content. Codex will review the code and some of the content as well because I'm paying for 2 max plans. And then at some point, I believe another agent will come in and it'll dump like a big table of eval check results, like this passed, this passed, this passed, this passed. And so if one of those things doesn't pass, then this blue check mark doesn't run.
Is this conductor?
This right here?
Yeah.
This is GitHub. Yeah, it's all GitHub. These are just GitHub Actions. That's a really scary term for there's this piece of code that runs automatically as an automation when you create code and it looks at your code. That's what an action is. So I'm using like a bunch of software tooling framing to like do marketing and do a content engine. And this is one way that I think AI helps me a lot in doing that.
You said you run all this off of 2 pro accounts and that's it? No API or token?
I don't even think I don't think I even need 2 pro accounts to do that. I'm just like token maxing on a few other projects. Like, so the one that I demoed 2 weeks ago is this daft qtile like inference framework that I'm working on. I'm using like a hierarchical task network with an implementer, an auditor, and a planner agent. And they're like, once they achieve consensus on the plan, then they go and implement the hierarchical task network. But like, that's where I'm token maxing.
So this is all happening outside of like token
Yeah.
tokens.
Yeah. I don't think I would need a max thing to run my marketing engine. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyways,
Thanks,
yeah, I've talked for plenty.
I love skills, and what I'm going to show you today. So I guess the history of my AI usage was like GitHub autocomplete, or what do they call it? Copilot from the very beginning. Seeing autocomplete was just so cool for me. Really got me into just like really believing AI could code. Cursor from probably like early 2024 for about a year. Claude Code from when it came out until this past fall, and I've been pretty much on Codex since, I don't know, October. So I'm just gonna do this in Codex. This is applicable to Claude Code, but I'm just gonna show you basically how I work. And I've refined my skills. I've refined my like AI coding workflow a lot over time. And basically I'll show you like kind of basically my progression. So let's say I want to make Tetris. First, I don't know if this is big enough. This is like version 1. Make Tetris. Cool. And it'll do something. Then, it's like make a plan to make Tetris. implement that plan. Then I found a planning framework called plans. So OpenAI has this thing where they got agents to run for like 8 hours, and the way that they did it is they have this awesome file called plans.md. Super long, we're not going to read it here, but basically if I say make Tetris and then I give it this huge planning file, it's going to create what they call like an exec plan, and it's this structured document that the idea is that any software engineer who's coming into the project would be able to, like, with this single document, onboard, and it has like milestones and all the dependencies, it has everything you need to implement it. So if you have like a really, really ambitious task, this is changing a little bit with like compaction and like the whole goal mode thing, but I would super highly recommend checking out plans.md. It's just been the gold standard for me since October. For any task, describe the task, what you want, tell it to make a plan from it, and then say implement the plan. So this has become really repetitive. Basically, you can imagine you're like, okay, I'm gonna create a plan, implement the plan, review my work. So my flow would be like, I do whisper flow, so I'm like, oh, it's dead. I guess whisper flow is closed. Okay. I want to build Tetris. Make me a plan. Exec plan create. I'm pretty sure that Claude Code does this too, but you can chain skills. So you can be like improve, 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 implement, review. Oops, that's a different one. Review recent work. And I can run that like 5 times. And what's cool about the improvement loops and the improvement skill and the review skill, at the end of it, it returns a score. Like, how useful was this improvement on the plan? Or how useful was this review pass? And it'll say like, 7 out of 10. And it'll go again, 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. If it's 3 out of 10 or less, it'll just return the word skip. And so I could actually put this review thing like 25 times and go to bed. And if it made 12 improvements from number 13 to 25, I'll just say skip, 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 so it won't waste your tokens. But this has been my flow, really. It's like, I will kind of describe what I want, tell it to create a plan, improve the plan, implement the plan, and then review it. And this workflow is just awesome with chaining skills. All these skills are, like, this is the improvement skill. There's this Stanford professor called John Osterhout, and he just has a really, it's really clean software design. And so, like, the way that the planning works, it's kind of, I'm injecting this paradigm of software engineering into it. So I think that kind of architects the code the way I like it. So I'm not gonna build Tetris. It's like, oh, you're being really big here. What I do now, one big improvement I made recently, so if I do it again, I'm gonna say, I want to build Tetris. I'll say grill me. And grill me is a skill, I forgot what the guy's name is. I saw it on AI.engineer YouTube channel, but basically it will just grill you. Like, it'll go endlessly, just asking you like, oh, do you want multicolored blocks? Do you want to have a place to hold it? Like, how do you want the scoring to work? And it'll just ask you a ton of questions. So if you just it's really everyone's instinct. It's like, AI is so powerful, it can just do it. Like, it's always gonna write code for you, but is it actually going to follow your intent? So here I can just be like, and if I'm really lazy, I could do this. So it's gonna give me like 10 questions at a time, and I don't know, if you're not actually in the loop and answering the questions, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. But I think the point here with the grilling is like, use AI to extract the intent from like, what do you actually want to do? It's hard to say, I want to build Tetris, and then tell it every single thing you want about how to build Tetris. But if you tell it to grill me, it's going to just like ask you a ton of questions. Eventually you'll be like, okay, this is fine. And then tell it to implement the plan. So,
have you ever put another model in to answer the grilling questions?
No, that's an interesting question, or an interesting direction though, and it's actually where I'm gonna go with that. So in this loop that I was showing you, where it's like, grill me, create plan, improve plan, implement plan, review my work, review. So I was giving a talk at another meetup, and someone asked a similar question, like, oh, have you ever thought about using other models to review your work? And I thought, like, basically the point is that if your agent is implementing all this code, making all these decisions, having this giant context window, and then even if you say, like, think from first principles, look with fresh eyes, like, people have all these prompting tricks to try to, like, come in this with a clean slate, you know? It's not doing that because it actually has all this context. So I have a skill that it's pretty much just for writing stuff, but it will use the Claude CLI to write. So it's like in Codex, I'm telling it to use Claude through the CLI just to do writing. That's like one example of how you can do it. But to demonstrate like the importance of how I think people should be doing code review, especially when you're outside of vibe coding and toy apps, I built a toy app. So basically what I have here is just like a fictional dashboard for, for OpenAI. Sam Altman's logged in right now and you see some invoices. And, like also in this system is Anthropic and Google, but they're in different organizations. And so maybe like a product manager comes in and they say, I want to add a little section at the bottom where we can quickly look up an invoice. And so, the software engineer goes in there, they vibe code it, they open a PR, and I did this PR already. I'm going to just activate it here. Cool. Oh, 1 second. This is such a bummer. I should have. Hold up. Oh, this is gonna take a second.
We need a sacrifice for the demo gods.
Actually, I know what I can do. Clipboard history, it's gotta be in, oh, there we go. That's what we got, clipboard history. Thanks, Rickcast. Cool, so in here, basically the feature is like, you add a feature where you can just have a quick preview of one of these invoices above. But what the engineer did, which was careless, or the agent who is controlling the engineer did, is they said, basically there's this get invoice for user function. And what it does is it wraps the get invoice function. And there's something in this code where if you say get invoice for user, after it fetches the invoice, there's an extra check that says, let's make sure this user is actually allowed to fetch this information. And so when functions are named similarly, it'd be easy to make the mistake when we're making this fast invoice preview of just calling get invoice directly. So when you call get invoice directly, in this case, it doesn't do this extra guard to make sure you're part of the right organization. So in this case, if we fetch the Anthropic invoice, it's like, this is not meant for Sam, basically. It's basically, I'm intentionally introducing a bug that's showing, the whole point is that I'm opening up a PR and then I'm gonna review it. So what we're doing here is, that's a different repo. So I have this pull request open, and I have a plugin called Kodo. It's like, I don't know if you've heard of Kodo. Basically, I'm pretty sure they're using Claude models. But what's really cool about Kodo is inside of your Kodo org, you can define rules. So Kodo can pull from Slack, your agents.md, Jira tickets, any systems you have, you can plug into it, and it can automatically discover rules and create rules. And so really what you should be thinking about if you want to create a system that's really reliable is get your smart engineers together and put them into create rules that every PR is going to be checked against. So when Kodo reviews, what happens is, you've probably seen these code review agents on pull requests before. Like I have Codex. Actually, I hid the comment because just to make it not confusing to have all these code review agents. But Codex will review the code and it'll look at your repo, and that's great. You could have Claude do the same thing. Cursor has a different version. But in Kodo, you can define like really specific rules, like do not allow users to access other people's organizations. So it's just a really nice way to be able to encode your company's like methodologies and rules into a code review agent in like a really custom way. And yeah, it caught the bug. One cool thing is it'll actually give you a prompt to fix it. So you can, like, when Codo comments on your GitHub post, you can just copy a prompt and paste it into Codex or Claude Code and it'll fix it. And there's also a skill called like Codo resolve PR. So it's like it'll review your code and then the skill will actually just go read these agent prompts and then go fix it.
You've got a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not tech.
Sure.
Okay. So my question is, when is it machine learning, large language model, and versus like just software for a rule? When is a rule not just like a formula every time there's that, and it's vibing? It's telling, it has more knowledge and can do a more accurate but less deterministic thing.
Sure. So maybe a simpler example would be like a generic code review agent would find a bug. But if you have like a Codo rule, you could have something that says like, make sure there's no file with more than 300 lines, for example. So it's just plain writing. It's like kind of writing a prompt.
Okay.
So when the code review agent is reviewing, it's not only taking into context like your actual code, but it's like reading these human written prompts to enforce rules. If that's helpful.
Good enough.
Okay. Yeah, that's mostly it with the Codo stuff. It's really nice. They'll make these diagrams for you, what happens in there. And then I would just going back to skills, I would say so the reason I started using skills was like this exec plan create thing. Before, I think it was maybe even before skills existed, I would just like tag a file that was that planning document, say, make me a plan from this file. And actually, a lot of the stuff you were doing, I think could potentially be encoded into skills. I see your point about it like unnecessarily being injected into context. But there are some things that, like I made a really rudimentary version the other day of turning a blog post into a TikTok video the other day. And it's like, think of all the steps involved to do that. You need to read the transcript, you need to kind of come up with a plot, like, you know, an opening hook, figure out like the layout of how your final video, basically creating a script, turn that into voice. For every sentence, create a separate image, and then kind of stitch it all together. And that's something where you could do it. You could imagine going into Claude and saying like, hey, I have this blog post. I want you to create me a transcript from it. Oh no, change this part. I don't like the voice. Okay, now I want you to use Levin Labs to create audio for each section of the voice. Okay, now I want you to create images for each of these. But once you do something once, if you see yourself doing that a second time or a third time or repeatedly, creating a skill is just an awesome way to chain things together and yeah, kind of turn it into a process. So I'm huge on skills. I could
Happy to prove wrong. Happy.
And then one last thing I have, this is, who here has not tried the goal skill, or sorry, the goal feature in Claude? So goal, if you're not using all of your tokens, I would just go try the goal skill.
Just one caveat is goal works in Codex, loop is the same thing in Claude.
I think they changed it, yeah. I think they might have changed the name recently.
They're different skills.
Oh, interesting.
I see. Can you
But-
describe what this is?
Sure. So the idea with goal is like a year ago, or not even a year ago, the limit to what your agent can do is kind of limited to the context window. Like, you know, you have 20 chat messages, it starts getting dumber. But what they're doing now is, as more context is into your chat, it'll compress it. And it goes, it'll compress it. And the compaction is so good that they can just go over and over and over. So an example of a goal might be like, someone come up with a goal.
Make Tetris.
Yeah, make Tetris could almost be one-shotted like so easily now. But something, you could come up with something like pretty sophisticated, like, you know, I'm an attorney and I want to make a CRM for like intake out, you know, just like, you could imagine like a really complex piece of software. So you just do, I think it's in code or in a, oops, I sent it without, oh no. You just do /goal and tell it what you want. But then actually it becomes even more important to meticulously write the goal really, really well, because it's going to potentially run for many hours or days. So you go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I guess maybe you're gonna answer my question. I'll ask it in just a second.
Okay. So here comes Goalcraft. So I basically made this skill called Goalcraft, and the idea is you can do the same thing. Like I would do the same thing with Tetris. So I'd say, I want to build Tetris, grill me, and then get it to extract all my intent. Then I would say, okay, now turn this into a goal, and then I would invoke that skill. And so it'll write this just awesome goal with good end conditions. Every time OpenAI is posting, or like smart people on Twitter are posting new techniques for how to write goals, I'm like just copying those and like updating this skill. So yeah, that's a really good one. Go ahead.
Is the goal at the session level?
Goal is on a per thread basis. Yeah, per chat, basically. What you got?
Is it the basic auto compaction when it hits the limit, or is it more adaptive?
I think compaction works different between the agent harnesses. I know in Codex, it's when it gets to like 90% of the context.
I'm asking if it's any different with the goal.
Oh, okay. So what I find when I run goal, so I have this one for polymarket trading. I'm like trying to find a way to make money on polymarket, and then just like goal, make me money. It's a little more specific than that, but what it'll do is it'll go like, I have like these like virtual machines in the cloud, and like one is for research, one is for actual live trading. It's like offloading data to S3. So the goal might run for a few hours. The conversation turn will end. But then since the goal is still active, it's like, oh, I guess I need to pick up, like, where are we at? You know? So the conversation turns do end, but when the goal is active, it's outside of the thread, and it will pick up from like, and just say like, okay, where are we? Let's look at where we're at.
So I haven't done an either harness. I really haven't gotten into goals because I found that much like trying to get an LLM to do writing for me, I don't know what I want to say until I start writing. And I often find that I actually don't know, even if I think I do, I don't really know what I'm asking the LLM to do until I'm like 17 turns into a conversation. And then I begin to be ready. And the grilling task I've used, a skill I've used a bunch of times, it's awesome. How do you, and perhaps others who also have gone deep with goals, when do you reach for it, and when do you think you're ready? Like, what conditions are you satisfying internally? And that's probably baked into how you run your skill. So.
For me, I haven't used goal in a production code base or something that really matters. It's more for just like, it's really experimentation. I think in a similar way to if you were to ask like the day after MCP came out, like, oh, what are all the use cases for MCP? Like, people are creative and come up with different ways to use them. Same with skills. So I think with goal, it's so new that there's not like a lot of really best practices. But I think in Claude, you can do the same thing. In Codex, you can steer mid-combo. So if you walk away and you're like, it's making a shitty UI, you can go in and just steer it. Be like, just send a command while the goal is running, and it'll kind of like change the direction. You can also pause the goal and then say, grill me again, or you can edit the goal. So it's not necessarily you press play and it goes forever. You can definitely pause it and refine.
Can I quickly ask if anybody has felt they have successfully implemented a goal? Anyone else? Yeah?
One of them, like half the time almost, I'd say.
Okay.
So it was only because like I really wanted to define what I wanted, and I had everything set up to do it, and then it ran successfully, and then I was able to repeat it, but only, like I say half the time, not a full time.
One of my things is like,
knowing what you want is like one of the hardest things in AI.
Totally.
And
In life.
And in life. Yes, especially now when we have all these options. But I would be super curious to hear what you think it took to write that goal well enough that you knew that like if it goes and runs on this for 90 hours, I'm okay with it. And it's like I know it's gonna reach the thing that I need.
One thing about goal, I think the goal itself, I think it's similar in Claude Code, but in Codex, it has a maximum length of 4,000 characters. But you can do the grill me thing first, and then you can say, okay, like you might have 100 decisions you've encoded from your conversation before you even start the goal. You can just say, encode all these decisions into a markdown file, and then create a goal, and then reference that markdown file. So similarly to how you said not to pack too much into agents.md, I think it makes sense to have a slimmer goal. Like my hypothesis is that there will be like goal harnesses at some point where it's like, you create a goal and then it's pointing to all this other stuff that gives it instructions. But yeah, the fact that these agents can run for multiple days is brand new, and I think no one really knows what they're doing yet. What you got?
Sorry. The place where I'm most dissatisfied in general with anything that's I'm trying to run for a longer time horizon, or that's just the nature of the task, is when I think I can walk away and I was wrong about that. Like, if I'm happily living in this brand new future and I like go to the gym because I've given enough context to my, and then
You can get Claude on your phone.
Yeah. Well, yes, but I actually find that like it's not that good. The biggest challenge I face is when it would have been really good for an agent to have more context. I don't spot it up front. It doesn't flag it up front, even after girl mate, and then like 45 minutes was wasted because I was just letting it run. Not necessarily, it didn't know that it ran into a problem, and neither did I. I wonder if you or anyone else has like mental models that have worked for you in terms of getting agents to raise their hand, or like, I don't know, how to reach back out to you, or it's just an unsolved problem, because I certainly haven't solved it. I find it really hard.
Yeah.
My cheater shortcut's been like the predictive hindsight thing when making, like when framing the goal or framing whatever I'm trying to do, is that usually like will help define those things that
So what is that?
Predictive hindsight.
Yeah.
Somebody, I didn't make it, somebody else did.
Okay.
But you'll use that and it like will pretend it's 6 months or 12 months in the future and like look back and like do a retroactive audit on the work. And it's not perfect, but like I'd say that gets me close to what you're talking about. Of like, I don't really know how to define this better, neither do you clearly. How can we kind of like flush out some of these issues that I know we're gonna have to just approve our way through once we get there?
So you're basically saying you're trying to predict the failure nodes in advance. And so
Yeah, so I'll write my goal and say, hey, use predictive hindsight in building this plan. And then it will like create.
Okay. Sounds like a pre-board.
I use it in the goal definition to help me like, so when the goal gets finished, it's giving me something that I actually want to use and can learn from. It's usually not perfect, but it's like a good data point that I can go from.
So you haven't defined predictive hindsight for the agent. It kind of
No, it says 10, 6 months in the future, and then kind of look back.
That's
And that works pretty well.
That's funny because as a psychotherapist, I'm a therapist, and I don't say to my clients, "What do you think could go wrong?" I'll say, "Okay, let's think you're 5 years from now."
Yeah, it came from like the human side of things. Most of the stuff I try to do comes from like a human behavioral thing, and then I try to like put myself as the human into the agent or AI's like perspective, and that's gotten me like that mindset's gotten me further than other like approaches.
Okay.
Can you give another example of that mindset?
Predictive hindsight
Or no, just of that like behavioral psychology type of mindset that you're.
Like I use identity and soul.md files in a lot of my agents. So like the identity and soul will be tied usually pretty vaguely, or not vague, but it is vague enough to be like an identity and not specific enough to be like actionable, specific tactical things. And that usually keeps the agents like, it pulls them back to that like baseline when they start to drift away as the tasks, maybe I start to drift and start using the agent improperly. It will kind of give me some of that like friction so that it feels like, oh, am I misusing this agent? And that's why I use named agents a lot to like keep me using them properly, not because they need the format, but it's more for me than for it. Because kind of like what we've been talking about, like the models themselves are brilliant, and you just have to give them like a good structured setup to like go and play, and then it can like have all these crazy outcomes. But I'd say the soul and identity MD files have had this weird kind of effect that I can't tie one to one, but they do keep the agents kind of course corrected as they go.
You
should demo.
I should what?
Do you want a demo?
I can try. I mean, I have nothing prepared. I could like ask for it, but I could just talk about what I would build and stuff like that if you like.
You're welcome to.
Sure.
Yeah, cool thing that you saw.
Oh, amazing.
Cool.
How much time do we have, Lee?
I mean, we have as much time as we want. So I think that the event is officially over at 8:45.
Learn everything.
However, my personal goal is to learn from you. So please don't.
This
Nice.
is great. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for running the demos.
Hi, my name is Darin. I go by they, them pronouns. So this is like basically, I've been building an agent optimizer in Rust, and it's like not an agent, like an arbitrary artifact optimizer. You just like put something into it and you say like, this is good, this is not, and you give it a reward signal and then it like changes it so it makes things go up. And during the course of this, I've discovered that like, I don't know, there's just like a lot of ways that like agents like mess up. I've used like GPT 5.5 to like code all of it. And it's a really great model. It goes on for a very long time. And I've been using like goals, like basically goal came out and then I started writing this. So like I have been using goals to like implement all of it. And I've like run into a lot of like failure points there, right? So this is basically like how I do planning in Levin. And Levin is the name of the optimizer. And it's not like, there's still issues here, right? Like it's not great. I don't like love it. And I like run into just, there have been like many subtle failures. So I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about that today. But it's like generally like GPT 5.5 has this tendency to like reward hack, right? Where it does the thing that you told it to do, but only in the shittiest, like most, kind of pedantic, like, oh, it's almost there, but like really it just kind of lied to you, right? And it's like, oh, we made up something and like it has the same words and it kind of looks like the thing that you wanted to do, but it doesn't really like satisfy what you like wanted, right? So like this is the core like failure mode that I've been running into with goals, and I've been running into it with like just in general since like agents, like started coding with agents. It's just like the gap between like what lives in your head and like what actually comes out, right? So these are some concrete examples of like what happened, right? So I said I want an optimizer library, and instead it gave me like 3 runnable examples that weren't actually like an optimizer functioning. It was like this thing changed. It's like, oh, you have an no, you don't. No, you don't. Paper reproduction, right? So then it chose like this individual section of like the papers, and it chose the very smallest thing for like 8 of them, and it was like, I did all of it. No, you didn't. Like it was something like a shitty little fixture, right? Same with like how to use it. Same with like the like what parts of the project themselves were implemented. And like all of it, yeah, like all of it was progress, but they weren't what I actually meant when I said, yo, go ahead and like create this library for me, right? So yeah, so this is kind of how planning works in my repo. I have these philosophy docs, which I code in Rust because Rust is a good language for agents. It's like, it's very strict. And it lets you like encode like how you think about your system into the code base itself, which is very useful. So we have like 4 like key essays or 5 key essays, which is like Rust types, Rust traits, which are like another Rust concept, errors and tests, and then topology, right? So these 5 kind of make together like my philosophy, which I've kind of developed like through just talking to Claude and like other models a lot, of like how successful Rust projects actually go, right? So topology is like how you, the module structure of the project, and like how you enforce like boundaries between the different little components, so you could have things that you could reason about in isolation. We have specs, which is like the exec plan earlier, and then after so what I do is I'll just like talk to Codex and I'll say, where's this? Or I'll talk to Claude, I guess? No, I'll talk to Codex. Yo, we want to finish that whole Python seam we were doing. What all we gotta do. And it has context about this because like all of, like if you go into, like all of these like plans and specs, like they're all in the repo. So it's able to like reason about the evolution of the project itself. Great. But basically, like, I'll just say an idea, and I'll talk it through with Codex, and I'll be like, I want to set a goal, right? So then it does the research, and then it figures out, okay, how do we actually set the goal? And to do it, we have this like special little step, which is called like a goal handoff, right? So initially, like we craft, so the goal craft thing, right? That's basically like a skill that you give to Codex, and Codex puts together a prompt within like 4,000 characters. And how it works is like just this 4,000 character prompt just keeps getting read into Codex every single time it tries to stop, right? But the issue with that is there isn't really enough room in those 4,000 characters to kind of hold the broader arc of what you want to do, right? So if you have like a 30-hour task, like that's not something that's trivial to encode into that step. So what I do is I say, okay, let's go ahead and create a handoff, and then it like talks through with me like what fake versions of like things actually working would have looked like, right? So we have 5 bits in it, and it's like the original intent, like quoted, right? So it's like user stories basically. And then it's like, since I'm building a library, like how is this visible to our users? And then also, this is something that I only added after I saw this mess up like 6 times, but it's like, what else could you substitute that would like technically conform to the user's intent, but not actually be the thing that you wanted, right? So just like enumerating all of those, like trying to do that exhaustively, and then acceptance for like what you need, and then what we don't want to do, right? So we pre-register what fake success looks like. These are some real examples from my project. And then also something that I've put together that I found really helpful. This is kind of tangential to the goal thing, but this is like something that I use in all my code bases, where it's like I have this thing called for agents.md, right, which is the root file that is in your code base, and it's read into all of the context windows. And it's basically like a kind of like map of the territory, right? So it says these things live here, these things live here, and here's what goes here, right? So let's say we have a specific crate in the project, right? So it's like, okay, here is the engine, right? This is what connects to the file system. This is what drives like the optimizer's improvement loop, right? And we'll have explicit like yes or no things. And the thing is, like, the models are either like their harnesses are designed such that like when they work in X directory, these files are loaded into their context automatically, or in the case of like Codex and the GPT models, they're just kind of RL'd like into reading all the agents.md files, right? So this way we could kind of like scope them down and let the models have like peripheral vision of the code base, and like let them understand like what's going on. So it's like really like cheap and easy for them to like navigate and know, like when they have these like really big changes to make for things like goals where you want to like leave them alone for a while, they know, okay, if I want to mess with this bit, I go touch here, because like that's the structure of the agents.md files. But yeah, and so this is kind of like basically the workflow that I've converged on. And then the actual concrete things on top of Goalcraft are basically.
Did you write this before I was here?
No, this was like in the last couple minutes. Yeah, like I was like, oh, Goalcraft, and then I was like, oh, okay, might as well, like, since I'm using that. But basically, this is what Goalcraft does. So it has these like 6 things, and then before that, right? So we add basically I write. So also instead of a plan, right? I like to split them between like specs and plans, right? So we have specs because like that's like the letter, like the spirit of what we want. And then we have like plans, which are like how we would implement that in this code base, right? And keeping that separation and knowing that like plans are mutable, but like specs, unless something is really fucked up, like we probably shouldn't change those, is like a good distinction for the models to keep in mind. Because like conflating the implementation and what we want is like how we get these kind of like fake verification things that like I'm running into. But yeah, like we write the spec, and then we do the Goalcraft, the handoff, and then agents.md files. And then before Codex can finish any part of the goal, we have to have like real evidence behind it, right? So it just like adds all of that. So these are like 5,000 line YAML files. Like they get really big, but like they're able to hold all of this like nuanced to an extent. I still notice things that like fuck up, like, and a lot of the bottleneck I feel like is still on me, right? Where it's like, have I defined all the aspects of the API? Do I know what it should look like, right? And that's just so exhausting. But yeah, this is how I do like big long stretches of work with goals. Yeah. Any questions?
Is it on GitHub?
Yeah. It's open source. Still kind of a work in progress project. But like all of the like you'll see the agents.md files, so you can see how they're stacked. If you go to docs/philosophy, that's where like a lot of the there's like an essay about like code quality, right? So it's like good code disappears. You think through it to the problem, not about it. And it's like it's a bunch of philosophy essays. And there's also where is it? Docs. Oh, this is agents.md info. So then there's this pretty big document that I recommend pasting to your agents and just like going ahead and like, yeah. But it describes the structure of an agents.md file and like what the actual goal of the files are. And then it like walks the models through what's important there so that they can then set this up in any repo. There's also a hierarchical agents.md skill that I don't think is published, but if you guys want me to do that, I can. But yeah, delightful-ai/Levin for the repo. Also, if you are poking around here, this particular code base, Speeds RS, is also full of like best practices that I've set up, and both of those code bases are designed to be like very helpful and useful for like AI agents to navigate, work with, and work in reliably.
So my background has kind of been in like enterprise workflow stuff. I worked for a company, like a data services provider, basically for a bunch of years. And then about a year ago, saw the AI wave coming, or before that, saw the AI stuff happening. I was really interested to kind of get my hands dirty and like really learn the technology. And so about a month ago, I upgraded to Pro. I did Pro Lite, and that didn't do the full one, with the goal of using just token maxing until I used all of it. And so I obliterated the whole thing pretty much like immediately. And so that's kind of what was my mindset going into all this stuff. I didn't have like a specific outcome in mind, and I think that was really helpful in kind of me choosing what to work on. So the first thing was kind of the basic like operator OS that I had for myself as I was looking at different tools. It started with like small apps that were just very contained, very small, and I could host them on a website, and I could do it all from Codex, from one platform or one user interface. And then it kind of grew into more like I wanted to develop these more complex workflows that didn't necessarily have a UI that was like going to be sold or like going to be productized or anything like that. And so that's kind of how that was my mindset going into some of this stuff. And so that resulted in building Bob, and Bob is my personal OS that I use to manage everything. Bob found me this event. Bob kind of orchestrates everything with the goal of Bob having full digital, digital sovereignty. So I no longer want to control my digital life. I would like my digital life to be completely managed, so that I can live 100% in the real world and like use AI to facilitate those experiences and not the other way around. Right now, I feel like I'm spending way more time on AI platforms and like with AI, and I'm like, this is totally backwards. I want to get me out of here. So Bob's whole goal is to do that. So he has access to my like probably too much access, but I made that concession a while back. So all my location, all my diet, all my credit cards, everything that he has is looped into Bob, and then Bob is pretty well vetted with like my LinkedIn network, with my like resumes, with like a ton of stuff of information about me, so that he can give more relevant, contextualized information. And then a pretty robust agent routing system underneath that, so that Bob can route things either to himself to kind of orchestrate things on my behalf, or to Hunter. And Hunter is my career helper, basically. So he goes out, or she goes out. I had them gendered, I don't know why. But she goes out and goes and helps me find just job opportunities that I may or may not be interested in. And that has been like insanely helpful, because it got me, that exercise got me to basically really take my agent orchestration up a ton of levels. I went really deep into Databricks to kind of understand how they do things, and then copy their kind of systems for how they keep things in control. Because resume versioning and cover letters and all those kinds of things has to be controlled controlled and very specific. And the compacting window was having issues. I was basically running into all these issues where I had to have the work scoped super cleanly in order for it to have a useful outcome. So I eventually got that to a place where it can now fully run my job search if I want to do that. Oh, wait, I am looking for a job if anyone's hiring. But basically, that's kind of where that came from, and it's really got me to a spot where the agents will do what I ask them to do when I want them to do it every time with no correction within the things that I've thought through already. Obviously, if it's not something I've thought through, it's a little more of a question mark there. So that's kind of on the personal side, and then on the other side of things, I also built a company called Actually Nothing, and it's called that because it's not supposed to be anything. It's just kind of an internal pointed exercise to understand how all these things work. However, I've accidentally built things that people have approached me like, hey, I will buy that. I will do, like, I built a founder research studio that community colleges are like, hey, we'll pay for that. And I built like a founder research studio is basically like you take a core idea for a simple use case, and again, in the student context, and that person can go through and really vet the idea all the way through from end to end to kind of go, hey, here's how we actually tested. This is a good idea. What's the TAM look like for an idea like this? Those are pretty basic questions, but it's stuff like that to kind of go through all the way through. And then just kind of a bunch of other stuff. So I don't necessarily have like a specific thing to be like, here's what I've demoed, but I've just been absolutely like exploring as much as possible. And the agent orchestration thing, I think is the current area that I'm kind of doubling down on, because I've learned that the models are the models are the models, the math is the math, and that's kind of out of my hands at this point. And you have to give it a playground in which it can play and do the things that you want to do. Outside of that is kind of almost irrelevant, because we're like, we can have all this nuclear level intelligence, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't know what to do. So that's kind of what I've been working on. I'm sure there's stuff I've skipped over, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Could you tell us a bit about how you started building Bob and what Bob looks like?
Yeah, so I started building, I can actually have Bob is an app, actually, I could show you guys that.
iOS app.
Yeah, so this is Bob. Bob's like my little app. It's just pretty basic. It's what happened, and like any AI product, it's going to be the UI is like not the fun part. Like that's kind of boring. So I have like a talk section where I have a live Bob thread that opens. Bob lives on a spare computer at my house, and so I'm like tailwinded in here. I have all the networking set up so that I can access it from here and all that jazz. But basically, I have a thread here that's open that is set up with all the Bob context. So I'll be like, hey, after this event, I'm going to try a few places around here that will be like, I'll probably like that my friends will, from what it knows about me. Again, this isn't like a fully answerable thing, but it worked great last week. I had got 2 suggestions. One was for like some place I wanted to get drinks with some friends, and then I had a networking person who wanted to go smoke weed after an event, and I was like, I don't really know where to go smoke weed, and it found me like a super fancy, like, it did a great job, like found this perfect like networking weed spot, and I was like, didn't know this existed, but it did, and Bob found it because
And are you running a local model on that machine as well?
No, it's GPT 5.5. 5.3 for some. I do routing, so I'll sometimes do smaller models for stuff. But Bob runs on 5.5 at home. Yeah, so that's kind of how we started, and then I set up a whole bunch of, again, kind of threw privacy out the window and set up a whole bunch of passive observability, so that I don't have to talk to Bob ever. Bob always knows what's going on, and it knows I'm here. It knows that I won't know that I'm on a YouTube video or anything like that, but it'll know that I'm here. It sees that I traveled here, sees that I bought a train ticket, kind of connects all the dots and gives me like a full 24-hour view at the end of every day.
Did you consider a local model for like?
I have, yeah. So I'm in the middle of doing that, basically. So I'm kind of wanting to look at Odysseus and Llama and kind of all that stuff.
Okay, so you have a bunch of integrations that Bob has access to.
Tons.
I would imagine most of those are just Apple on your phone.
No.
Or are they like other stuff as well?
So when you say integrations all being Apple, in what sense? So this isn't I didn't download the Bob app from the App Store. I had to like make it. Yeah.
I guess I meant like, so your GPS location is coming from your phone.
Yes.
Your text messages and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other things where you can connect your email and your credit cards. Maybe you're doing like Plaid and things like that. How many integrations do you think you have that you're managing, and like, have you reached like a steady state of like all the things that you wanted it to have access to?
I would say I've reached a usable state. I'm sure there's more things. I'd like to get the location data and the spend data to be a little bit more
granular so that I can get a more, so that the trends it's picking up are going to be actually relevant. Because, oh yeah, and then at the end of every day, it puts all this stuff into an Obsidian vault that it kind of creates the brain on the back end so that I can, this isn't going stale, hopefully. That time will tell if that system actually works. Because I've only started been building, actively building for like a month now. And so what was I gonna say? The source, oh yeah, so I have like basically steps and workouts, locations, normal Apple stuff. And then I also have all the network connection has to be live in order for it to like live there and for me to access it here and for it to be live there to see everything while I'm working. And then I think that is, and then also has like an activity monitor on my computer so it can see everything, like my screen sees which apps I'm actually using and kind of does a breakdown that way. And I'd say that's been pretty helpful because it would be like, hey, you spent 3 hours on, it's like just a better screen time across everything is kind of how that works. Yeah.
So you're not using something like OpenClaw, it's like a custom
I rebuilt OpenClaw myself basically, yeah. Because the goal was to like learn as much as possible and I just happened to build, it's a harness essentially that I kind of used to go and then do other things. And so actually nothing is kind of the umbrella harness, I would say almost, is kind of what it's become, that I can then go and deploy and point it in direction that I want. And it does a much better job than I would expect to like get me to that, not 100%, but 80, 85, 90% on whatever I'm trying to do.
Hey, what kind of task does Bob initiate with you? What are some things that you generally prefer?
Yeah, so I'm working right now on the initiation part beyond like scheduled stuff and kind of the boring stuff that you can make look clever but isn't actually clever under the hood. But currently he just follows up on mainly hunter duties. So Bob is kind of he has access. He has read access across all of my other agents and all of their other work, but he can't do work on their behalf. So I'll be like, hey Bob, what's going on? What do I need to do? He'll talk to all the other agents and get me the status for like actually nothing. I had this like a bid procurement packet workflow that I'm working on. That's stuck because I won't make a phone call. So like I'm the blocker of that process, not anything that Bob's doing. And Bob will nag at me to make that phone call until the phone call is made. He'll see the phone call was made, watch the follow up, and then move on to the next task. And that's been like personally a huge game changer. Like my productivity, just myself outside of AI, has like skyrocketed. I was doing probably like 1 or 2 applications a day to now like 25, and they're all of the same quality as before. Granted, that whole problem is kind of getting flooded with more problems by AI. But at least from a functionality perspective, I'm super blown away. But yeah.
How are you doing passwords?
Passwords, I do all via Cloudflare. It's all hosted.
Like a secret manager?
Yes. So you guys, this is where it's definitely going to get out of hand. My father is a ServiceNow staff engineer, and I had him check everything afterwards.
Nice.
I'll put it that way because I probably couldn't answer your question as technically as you want me to.
I just use 1Password, not like fed up with how it works, right?
Oh, for like the token management and like switching
no,
over to like API tokens
like
or
my actual accounts. I have like 500 accounts and I need my sign.
Oh yeah, I think I just use the basic Apple one to like manage the.
Yeah. Okay.
I think.
There's the grace.
Say again?
The Apple password that I do tricks.
I'm not totally sure which problem I'm answering. Like just because I have a bunch of services that I use, and I have like random I use good passwords for those. I don't repeat passwords.
Yeah.
And I manage all that with like just the Mac.
And the agent can access like all of that and can use them
Yeah.
whenever it needs.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Wait. That's what I'm
But
trying
like,
to do too.
what's
So the way maybe I'm answering that incorrectly because it's not accessing my passwords. I don't want to run my passwords through a large language model. I do also want to preempt this. Semi-technical, like I said. I know a little bit of this stuff. Definitely can easily get out of my depth here. However, I have everything set up via an API token where it makes sense, where that happens. Those ones I rotate the tokens either myself or I have a manager that I can do it with. Haven't quite set that up to a level that I'm comfortable with, but it's in the works. And then as far as like actually logging into stuff, I'm trying to think of anything that it can't just use the token that I have set up for it. Can you think of one of the things I mentioned that it can?
Well, what do you mean when you say token you have set up for it?
Like so, for example, and actually not like we're talking about for Bob or for actually nothing.
Bob.
So Bob is way more. I have him way more locked down than actually nothing is kind of public facing, and Bob is more or as locked down as I can make it. I wanted to make sure I'm understanding where. So Bob exists. The majority of Bob exists locally. I'd say the only thing that he needs a password for, he's going to need tokens to get into Gmail, and that's set up via the normal Codex interface. I also have a second one set up on my, how is it set up? So basically, I have two emails, right? I have my own email that Bob can use, and Bob only can write drafts. He doesn't actually send anything yet. I don't trust him yet. And then Actually Nothing has its own staff, and I have Peter at Actually Nothing, and that email is routed separately. Codex doesn't support like having two Gmail connectors, so one is connected via the Gmail connector, and the other one is set up via some local clever configuration that we got done. That might be a security risk. We'll see. I don't think it is though, as far as like, no gut checks went off. I'll say that, and I'd say I have like a C+, B- gut level. That's how I'd grade my and my father also didn't have any like alarming red flags.
And also, like, what about location? How are you doing that right now?
Yeah.
Do you have cameras in your house?
No. So that again, these are things I'm like, do I want to cross that line? I don't know. Like, because at that point, it's like, then I'm just going to become a full live streamer and make a ton of money. Because I'm like, if my data is everywhere, like, it's everywhere. Like, let's go that's what live streaming is, right? So I would say the location stuff, I basically have Apple. This is not a good security part, so don't hack me, please. But basically, Apple is sending over the actual like longitude, latitude over to, where is it sending it to? That's what's being collected by.
iPhone?
Again, you guys are going out of my depth here. It works by taking it takes regular pings of longitude and latitude. Whenever I move more than 15 feet, it grabs my location whenever I move more than 15 feet and sends that off to Bob. Bob has a database that puts in. That's all local. I don't want to put that in the cloud or do anything crazy with that, because you can really get some scary information out of that. And then there'll be an aggregate that Bob takes, and then it's like, hey, you went to the gym, or you went to a restaurant, or you went to whatever. But all that's aggregated before Bob sees it. If that makes sense. I'm sure if anyone has any better suggestions for doing this stuff, I definitely haven't I've never walked anyone through my build like this. So if anyone has suggestions or is like, hey, don't do it that way or do it that way.
I would be very curious. You might enjoy the GOG CLI and the Go Places CLI.
Okay. Do they just set that up automatically then? Or not automatically?
Yeah, just Codex desktop using Chrome should do it.
Okay.
But it's like CLIs for all of Google Workspace, so Docs, like Gmail, like everything, and then Google Maps as well.
And it'll sort of pull in Google Maps and be able to like grab my phone's like route data and all that.
Probably not grab your phone, but like as far as like location matching or like just searching for places.
Yeah.
It's like more agent like native weighted.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll check it out. What'd you say it was called again?
Go Places.
Go Places. Okay.
GOG.
There's a lot of crazy, security risks when it comes to like persistent agents.
All of this,
It's but it's really cool to hear like what you built with this.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see behind the hood.
I'm happy to. I mean, offline, I'm happy to walk you through kind of what I have. I don't share with people only because it's like I have
It's
no
very
intention of like selling this,
compromising,
and there's a lot like the Actually Nothing side of it is pretty. There's nothing harmful there, but the Bob side, I'm like, yeah, that needs to be like locked down with a key. But happy to walk you through whatever.
Beyond the learning element, was there a reason you did Bob rather than like OpenClaw or Hermes or something?
Bob versus what?
Like OpenClaw or Hermes or like
Both my grandfathers are named Bob and Bob the Boss.
No, sorry, I just mean in terms of like the actual, like you built the whole thing.
Oh! I thought you meant why did I name it Bob? I was like, that's an interesting question. There's a reason, but okay. No, it was because the learning thing. It was because my background was semi-technical, and I'd managed data projects before, so I knew kind of how data systems worked, and I knew what an LLM was. At its core, it's just math, and so I'm like, you can bully math into doing anything you want. So I kind of took that approach and was like, all right, well, I'll bump up to the $100, or I was on the $20 one, just doing it chat-wise, bumped up to the $100, and was like, kind of had the like, oh, holy shit moment when I was like, all this stuff, all the projects that I previously had been paid decent money to manage, I can now do that, and all of that work can be done from this seat. All the expertise doesn't come with it, but the ability to do the work does. And so that was like, okay, now I can take companies from 0 to level 1 or 2 like in an hour. And so I've just been like pushing the limits in every direction, and that's kind of why I have this like this huge amalgamation of stuff. That not all of which works together, but I kind of created that actually nothing umbrella to sort of give myself structure, to have like a product shelf, and then I have like work streams, then I have like pipelines for information, and like for example, we were all talking about like it's the Twitter world has like tons of info. I have like a creator pipeline that goes and like looks at all the creators that I've approved, kind of summarizes them into what technologies make sense to add to my build and which don't, and then we kind of go from there. But anything else?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys.